Welcome everyone to our September ACLS webinar. Today we have the Reverend Bridget Fidler and the Reverend Shelly Stackhouse from Partners for Sacred Places. They have both been ordained ministers in the United Church of Christ for more than 20 years. Bridget is committed to interfaith dialogue in particular. She has served on several interfaith committees in Connecticut and has served as a corporator for the Hartford International University for Religion and Peace, and has been involved with their international peacemaking program. Committed to creating connections between people to find creative ways to work together, Bridget brings a deep understanding of church cultures. She seeks to help churches see themselves and their role in the community from a fresh perspective. Shelly has a PhD in Liturgical Studies and has taught at several seminaries. Since coming to Partners in 2021, she has worked in many of Partners' services and programs, including working with staff to develop and pilot the use of new tools for transition services. Her areas of expertise include public speaking and presentations, shepherding older and historic church buildings, and strategic visioning. Today, the title of their talk is Community Engaged Liturgical Design, and they're going to talk about a case study of a church in Philadelphia. As part of the project, they sought to incorporate the community around the church building into the liturgical design, which seems like a very interesting concept. So at this point, I will let them go forward.
So I want to just begin by saying a quick word about who we are at Partners for Sacred Places. I don't know how many of you have heard of us before or know about our work. We are headquartered in Philadelphia, but we have staff in Connecticut, Chicago, Nashville, and Philadelphia, and consultants all over the country. So we do work all over the country. As I was just saying, I'm headed out to Spokane on Sunday afternoon to work with a presbytery out there and 5 churches. What we do is, as it says here, work at the intersection of heritage, faith, and community. So we are especially concerned about older and historic sacred places of all faiths. We are non-sectarian and nonprofit. And older, of course, in this country in architectural terms, in historic terms, because this is the United States, is anything older than 50 years old. So a lot of sacred places qualify as historic, even though they don't think they are. All those mid-century modern places are now considered historic. We are concerned about the preservation. We started as a preservation organization, so we're certainly concerned about the preservation of those places. But we are more concerned about how those places are being used. So we work with congregations to maximize community use of their place and to help them to get the place prepared for community use and to reach out into the community to see what those uses might be. You want to flip it, Bridget? So one of the ways that Partners first got into the community engagement piece out of starting as preservation is that they began to understand some years ago that a lot of these sacred places are at risk. You want to flip to the next slide. Partners and the University of Pennsylvania commissioned a study to investigate all of what was going on in sacred places and in the community. And they discovered, as you know, this was many years ago, about 30 years ago, but you know that this issue has only been exacerbated in the last 10 years, and especially since the pandemic, is that a lot of sacred, historic, beautiful, amazing buildings are at risk of no longer serving their community. Indeed, they're at risk of falling down, and some of them have. So they were trying to figure out, how do we get the folk in the faith communities and the folks in the general community to understand the value of these places. So they did a simple survey to begin with, and they realized after doing this survey that many congregations use their buildings largely for the benefit of non-members. They did a survey and discovered that 81% of the people going into this one was churches in particular, to most churches in any given week, 81% were not members of that church. They were there for community programs, AA groups, food, soup kitchens, all sorts of arts programs, everything. And that was a telling number because a lot of folk in government and other places make the assumption, no, that's not going to work, that churches are for the church folk. Go ahead, Bridget, to the next one. So they found 93% of urban congregations open their doors to serve members of the community. They provide enormous hours of volunteer service, and the value of these resources is considerable. In the beginning, they thought it was about $200,000 per year per congregation. Then the University of Pennsylvania, you can go to the next slide, Bridget, developed an algorithm and a whole process of trying to figure out what is the economic value to a community of the typical, in this case, it was churches, the typical church. So the halo effect is what that came to be called. Halo because it's good stuff, but also halo because if you think of a halo, it's spreading out, a light that spreads out from a center. And that's what this is. So we have an instrument. Can we mute Dan? I think there's some background noise maybe in his. We developed an instrument to try to measure exactly what the economic contribution of a church was. And this is difficult because, you know, church folks know they do good stuff, but they don't want to monetize it. They don't do it because it has monetary value. And yet government, foundations, lots of folk in the community who do things like zoning and community planning, for them, the value of a place is monetized. So how can we give them something they understand? So a study was done in Philadelphia, Chicago, and Fort Worth, and this was urban congregations, to discover that the average annual economic halo value per congregation is $1.7 million, which is a stunning number. And you can see the different kinds of things that get measured. A really interesting one is what we call the magnet effect. And that is what happens when there is, let's say, a wedding in a church or a synagogue. We think about what happens at the wedding, but we don't always think about the magnet effect that is. People come from out of town to go to a wedding. They stay in a hotel. They eat dinner at a restaurant. They may shop in nearby shops, have coffee in the morning at a coffee shop. All of that adds money to the local economy. Go ahead, Bridget. So then they realized that urban and rural churches are different. And they decided to do a similar study. We got a grant to do a study of rural United Methodist churches in North Carolina. And they discovered there that even in rural churches, it's around $700,000 to $800,000 a year is the economic contribution of a rural congregation to its community. And when those churches close, that is lost. And that's really important. Go ahead, Bridget. So one of the things that we do with congregations is that we ask them, who are the stakeholders in your sacred place other than the members of the church? In Mr. Rogers' words, who are the people in your neighborhood? And how would they be impacted if this place were no longer there? That's eye-opening for folk in the congregation, but it's often also eye-opening for folk in the community. Bridget, can you go to the next one? So if your congregation is stewarding a community asset, if your constituency goes beyond your congregation, then the surrounding community have their own priorities and hopes for your property. They don't want to see it abandoned and crumbling. They don't want to lose what's going on in there. The AA groups, the arts groups, the after-school programs, the children's piano recitals, the daycare, so many things that happen in sacred places. So one of the things that we spend a lot of time doing is helping congregations understand ways that they can listen to the community around them to discern what the community needs and how the community might partner with them in the use of their space. I'm in Connecticut today because this evening I'm leading what we call a community conversation for it's a congregational church that has a meeting house that was built in the 1700s. And they are trying to figure out who might partner with them to do some creative things with this meeting house property. So given that, then I'm going to turn it over to Bridget, who's going to talk about this remarkable project in Philly where a congregation, a Roman Catholic church, listened and interacted with their community.
Okay, thanks, Shelly. So one of the first projects actually I worked on as a consultant for Partners for Sacred Places was St. Vincent de Paul's Parish in Germantown, Philadelphia. And I just wanted to acquaint you a little bit with Germantown. There are many Germantowns actually in the United States. Germantown was named as a separate borough outside of the city of Philadelphia in the late 1600s, settled mainly by Mennonites and Quakers. Actually, there were more Dutch there than Germans, but a German got to name it. So it's in the northwest part of Philadelphia, and also played a very active role during the Revolutionary War. George Washington was temporarily housed there. And there was a famous battle that took place in Germantown. And so Germantown is a rich historical place in the city of Philadelphia. So the parish itself was constructed in 1849 through 1851 in the Georgian style, and it was added to as time went on. As you can see, the dome was added in the mid-late 50s. And the property was enlarged again in 1879 with the addition of a seminary and a chapel. It was the first Catholic church in Germantown. The story of Germantown also is that as things began to shift in cities, as they always do, there was an influx of Italians and then Scotch-Irish, folks who also started to populate this part of the city. And Germantown, no longer sort of an outside borough or the country, became incorporated into the city of Philadelphia later on. And then, as various different migrations happened, including the Great Migration, a number of African Americans moved into Philadelphia. And once again, there was the first kind of white flight, so to speak, to Germantown. And then later on, Germantown demographic changed again. And I just wanted to share this data with you just to give you a context of the people who make up Germantown today. So this data basically shares that 58.5% of the population of Germantown is now Black or African American, with a sprinkling of other folks. This number, I think, keeps shifting because as young people also looked for places to live, Germantown is certainly an area that they're going to look to. Plus, Germantown is a historic community. So there are many different kinds of domiciles in Germantown, some very famous ones and quite beautiful. But as you also can see here, that the demographic is pretty young as well. And so that kind of gives you a sense of who Germantown is today. So St. Vincent de Paul is a product of Germantown, and Germantown has a history. Even though there was a lot of religious discord and fear of Catholics, there were many protests when the church was being built, and even people throwing things, rocks or whatever, at the church once worship began to take place. And they finally just gave up because the Catholics were continued to just worship and not be stopped by their protests. As a matter of fact, there was even a famous riot known as the Bible riot that took place there. So the trials and tribulations of being the first Catholic congregation, mass, parish in the area was not insignificant. But also, as time went on, it became the home for a number of social justice movements, especially the anti-slavery movement. And so St. Vincent de Paul really grew out of that kind of soil, and really is one of the most vibrant and active Catholic parishes that I have really ever encountered. I will say that they truly live up to their mission and vision. So here, St. Vincent de Paul Parish is a faith community striving to live Jesus's gospel message of love, peace, and justice for all peoples. And I thought for this group in particular, it would be important to know that the celebration of the liturgy is central to them. Of course, through the Eucharist and the guidance of the Holy Spirit, we will continue to nurture the gifts of all our members. Our parish family, while remembering our past, will draw strength and unity from our diversity. We will foster an atmosphere of warmth, hospitality, and prayerfulness. And we pray that our commitment to these efforts will further the mission of being one with our God and one with each other. And, you know, what I wanted to say about this community is not only is it racially diverse and age diverse, it really has some amazingly vibrant young people who have found a real home in this parish. They are led for the past 11 years by Father Sai. Father Sai is the most energetic man I have ever met. I believe he's on his way to Africa now, where the church has a mission. It's not unusual to get emails from him at 4 a.m. because that's what time he gets up. And he is just completely devoted to this parish. He was brought to St. Vincent de Paul from Baltimore, where he served a primarily African-American congregation there, because Germantown closed down its two other Catholic churches, and they were being merged back into the mother church. This was not an easy transition. The churches were somewhat ethnically diverse, and people who had to leave their beloved parishes to go to St. Vincent de Paul felt like stepchildren, I guess is the way somebody described it. And it took a long time. But Father Sai is persistent, and he is also one of the most inclusive and empowering parish priests I've ever seen as well. He was able to manage all of this because he really empowers his laity. and really allows them to take the lead role in many parts of their ministry and their work together. So what happened was they had this beautiful Italianate dome that leaked like a sieve. They had it repaired, and they put their, repaired and did their murals and got everything back in tidy, and then it began to leak again. So they were really had a huge issue. In 2016, the parish was able to raise $2.6 million to repair the dome. And once it proved to be watertight, they set about trying to decide what to do about their building. And they set about, they had 33 different murals that would have to be repaired or restored. And they sat down, a group of laity with the parish priest and community artists, to really sit down and think about what would be important here. During the feasibility study, many members of the parish talked about how important it would be to move away from the Eurocentric images and to move towards a more community-centered reflection of what Germantown looked like today. So, the murals reflect all kinds of people and ethnicities and places. They have all kinds of Mother Marys from Guadalupe and China. They just really embraced this. They used evergreen architectural arts as their artists, and primarily for the major murals. And what's interesting about this is, and there are some of the pictures here of the artists, along with, you can see photographs or pictures of the saints, the modern day saints that they wanted to include in their murals. And even in the center one, you see the the priest with the fire hat. That's Mike Judge, who was the priest who died at the World Trade Center on 9/11. They wanted to include him in part, not only because of his heroic efforts, but because he was openly gay, and they wanted to lift that up as important to who they saw themselves as a parish and as a community. And so they have all kinds of images there, and historical and modern figures. Let me just go here. The Stations of the Cross are another important part of the murals that were repaired and newly restored. And those were painted by Kevin Jones, a local artist. There's a wonderful piece about him on the Philadelphia CBS news feed. Kevin was, like so many of the members of the parish, deeply moved by the experience of creating this imagery. Many of the faces of the people in these paintings, in these murals, are literally the people of the community. He wanted them to be dressed like people in the community, and really celebrated the Germantown as it is right now, and the people who celebrate there and have their faith centered in this place. I'm going to show you a portion of a video now that gives you a little bit of an image of what the church looked like prior to the restoration. This was done in 2021, And it's pretty powerful. And I will see if this will work. Here we go.
St. Vincent's was founded by Father Dominic, a Vincentian priest, in 1851. The mission of the church was to reach out to the immigrant community.
Well, right now, St. Vincent de Paul is the only Catholic church in the Germantown community. And living in Germantown, raising my children here, for a good part of their lives, that's very important to me.
I don't think I've ever had an experience where people I didn't know were just so willing to welcome me into their home. I don't think I would have ever interacted with all the people that I do here and not had been with the St. Vincent community.
St. Vincent has become the hub of activity of serving the needs of the poor of all the community.
But it's also the work that parishioners do here day to day in the food pantry, in reaching out to the marginalized, in the inclusivity of anyone and everyone. It truly lives more welcome.
Face-to-face grew out of St. Vincent's. My place, Germantown, grew out of St. Vincent's All Catholic School, which is one of the gems of academia in Germantown, grew out of St. Vincent's.
We follow sort of the Vincentian charism, which is loving and serving others. And so we see St. Vincent's almost as a guide for us as to how to not only serve our school, but serve the community. St. Vincent's is beautiful, but the physical space needs a lot of TLC.
We had the deterioration of various murals and artwork in the church through the leaky roof.
We're trying to restore, but also reflect the community. And so we are tremendously excited. The people of God who come here, who have been so good, who have given their lives. This building is a reflection of who they are, the body of Christ.
So I didn't want to take the whole 8.5 minutes to show you, but I did want you to have the experience of seeing the interior, especially during the pre-renovation and then during the renovation. The architects that they worked with, Vitetta, were very, very careful to actually set up the scaffolding so that the parish could actually continue to hold mass in the sanctuary during that whole renovation period. And so that was a pretty amazing. I wanted to also share with you, because of who you all are and the work that you do, the reflections of some of the parishioners. As it turned out, in preparation for this webinar, I reached out to Father Sy, and he said, "Oh, well, we're doing videos of the parishioners' responses to the murals now that they've been up in place for a couple of years." And so I was very fortunate to be able to share some of these clips with you of their thoughts and feelings about them. Let's see. Oh, this is, let me just get out of here a second. Huh. Okay, let me just go here a second. I don't know why that won't go away. Okay, so forgive me for not being able to get a better lighting on this, on these two women, but this was still somewhat raw footage. So I just felt it was so important to share their stories with you, and I just love their t-shirts too.
Yeah, you'd always be told, these pictures are just the art that was presented, but you know, the folks of those times when they might have been brown people, but coming into St. Vincent, it's no longer just like, well, this is what they say. This is like you can see yourself in the church, and not only as a Black person, but everyone. You know, the church is very diverse, so everyone can see themselves being depicted within the murals in our church, and that just really helps your spiritual journey. It helps you connect deeper to God and to your community, and so it's been very impactful to my spiritual walk. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I would add, like, you know, we say all are welcome into the church, and having these like different images all over the church, all over the walls, really gives anyone a chance to walk into the church and see themselves. And like by seeing themselves and feeling maybe more comfortable at ease in this space, you can bring your full self to God. You can bring your full self to prayer. So having these images in the church has been really, I think, really impactful and special.
See, make sure I have this one.
I spend a lot of time in Mass, or have spent a lot of time in Mass over the years, holding my babies who are looking up and enjoying the murals that are on the ceilings. And I think it's really special and powerful that all those apparitions of Mary are there watching over the congregation, as you know, one's mother does, as Mother Mary does, watch over all of us. And the varying cultural backgrounds, just really helping to represent that, you know, Mary comes to us wherever we are, however we are, whenever we need her.
Yep.
What has happened for me is seeing the visual has made the text of the Bible or the gospel so much more real. And they kind of have dovetailed together where emotionally hearing the gospel or during Lent, seeing these stations and the murals, it's reached deep into me emotionally, where during the Easter Vigil at times, I really felt like I was right there as the crucifixion was taking place, which is emotional. And so that's how they affected me. In one way, the visual has made me understand the written word so much more and actually relate to it and experience it.
So that's I didn't want to take too much time to do that, but I did want to provide some time for conversation, thoughts or questions that people might have. I also wanted to share this image with you, which is a communion service taking place at St. Vincent de Paul, and included in this is one of their recipients of one of their programs, Face to Face, that really seek to help people on the margin to really find as much of a holistic whole life as possible. So it has been, it was a transformative experience for me to work with St. Vincent de Paul. It was very, very exciting to actually see the murals in real life once they were completed, because this took so much of this feasibility study and capital campaign took place during the pandemic. I couldn't go there. So it is really pretty amazing to have this experience with them. Especially for me, as someone who was raised as a Roman Catholic, I was very hands off about the church itself in some ways because of, I didn't like the nuns. But what I did love about growing up Catholic was the statuary and the powder blue sparkly ceiling and all the imagery, and especially at time of Lent with the statues being shrouded. They're just very powerful imagery for me. And meeting Father Sy and the members of the parish were so dedicated and so included in this whole process of this restoration and renovation that they really do deserve all of the credit for this. And they were able to also raise the $1.5 million that they needed to do this work. And they were also recipients of the National Fund for Sacred Places grant, which is a highly competitive grant, and only a handful of recipients out of hundreds around the country are chosen every year. So that's the story of St. Vincent de Paul. I'm happy to help answer any questions, or if you have questions for Shelly as well about Partners for Sacred Places.
Could you describe a little bit more exactly what the role of Partners for Sacred Places was in this renovation, repair?
Yeah, actually, it's very funny because we don't really normally have that much input into what happens on the interior, right? That isn't really our place so much. And Shelly can speak to this as well, our concern is always about the use of the building and its restoration, its repair, but it's really its connection to its community internally and externally. And so, Partners didn't have anything to say literally about the murals themselves. That was really the parish and what they wanted to do. So what we did was we helped them raise the money. One, through the feasibility study to really assess how members of the parish and the community felt about this restoration work. We also, as I said, they were recipients of the National Fund for Sacred Places, which is a matching grant. So they had to raise the money to get the grant money. And we did conduct an economic halo study, an economic impact study, and their economic impact was over $3 million a year. Not surprising when you hear about all the programs that have evolved and take place at St. Vincent de Paul. So that was our primary role, was really to be their fundraiser and to help them continue to be outward facing, even though this was a very outward facing, inclusive parish to its community and to the parish members itself.
But even more than that, because they were a recipient of a National Fund grant, what goes along with receiving a National Fund grant is not just the money. We have an extensive training program that all the congregations that receive a National Fund grant, and I'll say another word about that grant in a minute, but all congregations that receive one of those grants go through a training program in which we spend time talking about community engagement. Each of the congregations also chooses a technical assistance piece to receive. And I don't know, Bridget, do you know what their TA was?
I think it might have been the halo.
The halo. So the halo, the interesting thing about the halo is that we talk about it as being great for the community, but often what it does is that it sparks in the church. Oh, wait a minute, we didn't realize we were that important to the community. And suddenly their connection to the community grows because of that. Let me say a quick word about the National Fund. National Fund for Sacred Places is a program that is funded by the Lilly Endowment and is jointly administered by Partners for Sacred Places and the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Each year, we invite congregations to apply for grants from 500 to 250,000. Actually, that number is about to go up to 500,000, but we're in sort of a change process right now with National Fund. But right now it's $50,000 to $250,000 capital grants. They also can receive additional planning grants to work with architects and engineers and other folk like that. We get approximately, this year we got over 450 letters of interest for this award, this grant. We are going to give out about 25. So it's extremely competitive. And part of that is because we do work with them extensively throughout the process. I pastored a church, Center Church in Hartford, Connecticut, that received a National Fund grant because we had a 250-plus-year-old steeple that was about to fall into the tower of the world headquarters of Travelers Insurance across the street. It was an amazing program to work with. And we, part of it is that we were landmarked. So we needed to hire a historic preservation architect, which is more expensive and was totally worth it. So it's just a great program. It is extremely competitive, but it really is a terrific program. We also have the National Trust now has a program that's dedicated to African-American churches that are Black-led, that churches can apply to as well. And we are in the beginning stages of developing a national fund for synagogues. That's very early. It'll be several years before we hope to have that actionable. But you all may know that there are enormous numbers of synagogues in the country that are in danger of being lost. I've been working with an old Orthodox synagogue in Providence, Rhode Island, that is just, to say it's tragic, and the art within it is amazing. And what's about to be lost if something doesn't happen is nothing short of tragic. So anyway, that's more than you needed to know.
Peggy,
You're muted.
unmute.
All right. I just want to say thank you. I mean, that was a fascinating presentation, and I'm really grateful. I was a very, very long-term subscriber and member of Faith Inform, and so it was lovely that it found a place. But you've got a wider brief or different, slightly, I mean, it overlaps. So, but it was lovely that they found a place and to get to know what you all are doing. And I don't know, Bridget, or either one of you can answer this, but I would just be curious to know if you know how the process worked at St. Vincent de Paul for deciding which images of Mary, and I mean, how was that done? And my other question is, what happened to the churches that closed? Do you know?
Yeah. So they had it was a committee, an internal committee of parishioners and local artists as well. So they met for a few years. So it was, and I think it was a process, but they all, I think the majority of the people in the church really were in favor of these more inclusive images and diverse images. So it was a process. You'd have to ask them more of the details about how that went. But it's important. As a matter of fact, in my research for this, St. Francis was one of the congregations, and it sits empty. And the other building, I think, one of the buildings was able to be used as a high school, but basically this is the problem with so much church real estate right now. We know that in the city of Baltimore, they're going to be closing something close to 89 parishes. And, you know, and Chicago is the same. I mean, it's just, especially the Catholic Church, which owns so much real estate, it's particularly difficult. And, you know, Partners is very much an advocate of trying to keep congregations in their worship space and to find ways to share that space with others, so that they can remain in place, because so many congregations have gotten so small, and they are so dedicated. It's painful for us sometimes, to be honest, because there is so much love and so much dedication, and these places, you know, as Shelly said, are so beautiful. And people, in the case of Providence, that couple were giving their own money to try to find ways to make this, you know, to make this work. And there are wonderful examples, you know, like Eldridge Synagogue down on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and others that have been able to be restored. But it's years and years and years. I know a church in Brooklyn that has an amazing mural that was created in the 1970s. All the people in the neighborhood, actually, it was a Pratt student at the time who did it, who you know, just made this incredible mural. But the church, literally, you know, the foundation underneath was starting to shift, and walls are starting to crack. And they have been working on restoring their building for 22, 25 years now. And they have such a ways to go. And then new things happen, like they just had a ceiling, you know, a ceiling collapse in part of their worship space. So
this is Lafayette Avenue Presbyterian Church is what she's talking about. And if you ever get a chance to go to Brooklyn and can go to Lafayette Avenue Church, those murals will blow you away.
Yeah.
It's not, I mean, that's not traditional Presbyterian church
no,
liturgical design. So it's pretty special.
Yeah.
What Bridget is talking about, the transition piece, we have a director of transition. We're doing more and more work with congregations who are, we hope that their buildings can be, what we say is transitioned in a missionally aligned way. In other words, not made luxury condos, but made into some kind of, we worked with a church in the Berkshires that is now an arts center. St. James Place is a community arts center that hosts a whole variety of community arts or theater, music organizations. So that happens. Some folk are turning it into affordable housing or specialized kinds of housing. We are working with a church in Kansas City that's actually looking at turning the sanctuary part of their building and the education building into co-working space. They're going to divide the sanctuary into 2 floors, but they're going to maintain the structure and the windows and you know, everything that's there right now, so that you still have that sense. I've also seen them made into bars.
Ken,
And
do you have a question? Ken, you had raised your hand before.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Bridget and Shelly. Wonderful presentation. I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and have worked with Pastor Drew Henry at Emmanuel Presbyterian and the folks from Sacred Places, Partners. And there was a wonderful process. This is a building that was built, you know, the first chapel was built in like 1950, and then the big sanctuary was finished in 1956. Seats 700 people, and they're down to about 70 people on a Sunday that worship there. So they've got a big problem. But what I experienced with Partners was the people that came in basically did what I would describe, and this is sort of my question, programming before the programming, like before the architectural and liturgical kind of programming. And I'm going to help them move into the old chapel, the historic original chapel. But they've got this huge space that what I saw Partners do was help the congregation envision entirely different use and go through the initial grieving process over what they lost and start to look to the future and envision this building as an incredible resource for the community. It's in Nob Hill, half a block off of Route 66. It's a vibrant part of our city. And already the Philharmonic is using it as a performance space, and they want to create an arts kind of community center here. And it's facing a lot of challenges, but the programming before the programming in this sort of grieving process and revisioning is what I kind of wanted to ask you about. Do you see that as sort of a real primary part of your work?
Yes.
That is
Yeah.
critical. I've often said post-pandemic, so many sacred places in the United States are enveloped in three things: in grief, in fear, and in weariness. And we have to address those things before we can move into the kind of creativity that, that happened at St. Vincent's, or that's happening in Albuquerque, or lots of other places, actually. But that's a critical work to do.
Yeah.
And part of that is truth telling, getting beyond magical thinking.
Yeah, we are, I say very often, we are not believers in if you build it, they will come. And we are not, very often we have to help people shift the dial a few degrees away from, well, if we could just get the young people to come. And, should not be the purpose of your project. That let's look at your community and what is it that's missing in your community, and really the awareness of if these and when these sacred buildings and their congregations and all the mission work that they do disappears, huge percentages of the safety net for that community also disappear. Right? And so in New York City, I believe it's about 40%. So that's money that the town or the city is not spending on these services. And so you could have, especially in some communities, these sort of safety net ghettos where people who used to go for checks for physicals, or with a parish nurse or something along that line, an AA meeting, or a daycare program, are all going to disappear. And so, and not only that, it's the architecture, right, of all of this. It's the physical place itself that usually brings a certain kind of beauty and a cultural. Sometimes I literally, if I'm thinking lofty, I will say, part of our work is saving part of Western civilization, because we can go to the sort of mundane really quick in this country. And so how do we preserve what's precious and really beautiful architecturally as well?
What I saw happen with the partners or the stakeholders that were brought in and it was a very diverse group of community leaders. They helped the congregation envision the future, because when they heard what the community people were saying about this wonderful resource, they got very excited and committed themselves to making something happen. So that bringing in the stakeholders was a critical part in my experience. Wow. Really
because
great.
they think they're on their own, and
not.
unless they really reach out and invite people in. Remember, for years, congregations didn't have to invite anybody in. In the mid 1950s, people just flocked to it, and for that mindset to shift is a big ship to turn for congregations of all kinds. And so that is, I think, for Shelly and I, some of the most rewarding work we do is for them to sort of have that aha moment, so that they really see that they can shift their thinking a bit and really take a different avenue.
Takes a lot of diplomacy and a lot of patience.
And a lot of love.
Lots of patience and a lot of love. Yeah, that's true.
We're in the paradigm shifting business, is what I say.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Carol?
I have been working on historic churches since the mid-80s, so it's been a long time and very familiar with the beginnings of partners and all of that. But my question that I have for you today is about the study that you did there that was done with the university. I wasn't quite sure who was the
University of Pennsylvania.
Okay, and this was an economic study?
Yeah, it's the halo effect study. We can, Carol, if you reach out to one of us, and I don't know if our emails are publicly available, or Pam, you can route her to us. We're glad to talk to anybody. We can send you a copy of the report that details this study. We'd be glad to do that.
Yeah, I'd really like to see that.
Yeah,
Thank
just let us know and give us your address and we'll send you a hard copy.
Okay. That'd be good. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's good to see how the longevity of partners and also the ways in which you've branched out around the country.
Yeah.
We're up to about 25 full-time staff right now, which
Yeah.
for
Well,
a
when
nonprofit like us is huge.
Right, it is huge. I knew Bob and Diane when they started it.
Yeah.
So that's a long time. So
Yeah.
it's nice to see and good work.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Bridget and Shelly, for your fabulous presentation. We really appreciate it.
Thanks
Great.
for having
Thank you.
us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for having us.